everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Christo and Jean-Claude and their ethical dilemma that they had within their lifetime. Uh, just the cost of their environmental art that they created and the ethical scale that they would weigh it on. It's going to be presented by me, Dominic, and let's get started. So, who are they? Christo and Jean-Claude are known for their large-scale environmental art. They would take on these huge projects that use either massive landmarks or landscape elements. Usually they would work within a fabric, either like wrapping the landscape or landmark, or even just placing it like in a particular way. Now, they were both born on the same day on June 13th, but in different locations. One, Christo was born in Bulgaria, and Jean-Claude was born in Morocco. They met and married in Paris in 1958, and they both moved to New York City in 1964. Usually their artwork would take years of preparation, like we're not talking just like 1 year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, 4 years, up to 10 years probably. Some of them were just such huge projects that they just take so much time, and just they had to work through like lawsuits and get the right permits and regulations in order to be able to work through any project they wanted. They for their funding, they refused any grants, scholarships, donations, any public help from the outside people, because they wanted to be able to finance their own artwork. And on top of that, they would deal with like any of the allegations or paperwork, lawsuits, documentations, legislations in order to get any work they need done. And on top of that, they also had to hire assistants to help, like wrapping object or placing the artwork down that they needed with their such huge artworks. So they couldn't do it by themselves. Just two people. So taking a look at their ethical scale, they had they would make an environmental impact. And environmental art, it just defines as like art worked on through the environment, and sometimes that can have an impact on the art, on the land, environment in general, just depending on what was created. They had to also get legal requirements in order to work on these projects, notices, permits, documentations, anything that would help. I also like to take a look at the potential hazards. Like I said, with the environmental art, it can have an impact, and it's out in the open, and the outside world is not being contained in a gallery. So there's sometimes like those weather hazards or other dangers that it could probably cause just environmentally. They had a bit of controversial work because they use an extreme amount of factory produced products and materials like fabric or any other wrapping material that they had included in their artwork. And to me, I think I see that uses a lot of material that would take from the environment to, rather than turning it around and making it into a beautiful piece of artwork. So overall, I'd like to take a look at the weight of their ethical scale compared to the good and the bad. And mainly what I see with their artwork is they would have like they're pretty much fighting against communities and environmental groups and official government higher ups. And I'm just wondering, is all that trouble really worth this art, that this large scale art that they've created throughout the years? First up, we're taking a look at the Surrounded Islands. This was an art piece done in 1983. It used 11 uninhabited islands as a canvas. They would basically, what they wanted to do was surround each island with a pink fabric, as seen in our picture right here. It was located in Biscayne Bay, Miami. They had these artworks. They had quite a bit of illegal battles with the local wildlife groups. Uh, the wildlife groups would pretty much be saying like the fabric could potentially like danger the environment, or it's not well suited for that particular area. Through my research, I have seen that they uh, they went into like a government officials and worked with them, like EPA or something similar, and to like, we would get the right fabric to be safe for the environment. That way, it wouldn't be too hazardous. Mm. During the beginning of this project, Cristo went and talked to the governor of that time, and after a while negotiations, Cristo and the governor finally agreed that he could rent the islands for $12,872. Next up is we have the umbrellas. The umbrellas, they were both built and staged up in Japan and California bays, more like a farmland. There was about 1,760 yellow umbrellas, and they were all very high, 19 foot tall. They took over 18 miles of the Californian farmland. But this project was kind of shortly lived. It was taken about down 3 weeks after 3 weeks after the exhibition schedule, and this was only because a woman was killed when a gust of wind took was able to pick up one of these umbrellas and it crushed her against a rock. Next up here we have the running fence. This one took more than 4 years to plan. It was a very long fabricated fence that ran 24.5 miles with white nylon and steel posts and cables. For this project, they had to hire 9 lawyers to secure their agreement to run this fence through 59 separate dairy farms, landowners, and ranchers. And eventually, they were still forced to pay out $60,000 for failing to get their proper permits for all the areas that they needed to cover. Next up is the Wrapped Reichstag. In 1995, the artists were invited to wrap a German parliament by by the president of Bundestag during 1991. It took a 2-year lobbying marathon to gain political support, as this was seen as some of the local people and even the other democratic officials as a mockery against Germany's traditions. And even though the building wasn't really used, it was turned into a parliamentary. It was taken into a vote which it did get approved. 223 voted no and 292 voted yes for this project. Before it was actually put into place, it was rejected 3 times across through 6 presidencies during Germany's time. The Gates is one of the first and only large-scale project installation in New York City. They had to battle against angry locals and community leaders, environmental protesters, and park officials because they were digging or putting these within the soil of these uh, parks that they installed these gates in. They wanted to do a lot more fences or a lot more gates, but they had to settle for less because it was just the only way that they were able to get it. Originally, they wanted 15,000 fabric steel drapes to be planted, and even after all that, New York hard to please critics weren't impressed by this art piece. Final thoughts. I believe the artists fought many battles to be able to approve their projects. They went they took the time to fight these battles, pay out all this money and all this funding, and they were still all funding their own works by just the artists. They didn't take any donations. They went up against community, environmental groups, and take legal causes. They even I believe they tried to compromise with the environmental safety to ease the people and the protectors of the environment of that they were working on. Some I I'm wondering, could they have created artworks that use natural material or blended in, or even just like eventually like kind of slowly disappeared on its own that wouldn't be able to harm the environment? Did they communicate with the community much at all? Like, would they took their thoughts into considerations when people went against what they wanted to do in the area? Was the legal cases and the cost of the project worth it all in the end to create this environmental art? It's it's a kind of a hard to put this into words, but they had to, just like one of our um, previous lectures, they didn't stick around for the whole time the art was going to be there, so eventually most of it had to be taken down, so they probably had to go back, but they were leaving this up to the people to see, and was this all just really worth it in the end?